Well, sometime around 40 years ago, I must have been between 9 or 11 years old. I came across this here cassette tape. I don't remember when or where. It could have been in a dumpster because we used to go dumpster diving at Goodwills and thrift stores and other places. It could have been on the side of the road for all I know, but it's a cassette tape that has a bunch of country artists. I still have never read their names, but I'm assuming they are country. Um, I can't read it very well, but Floyd Kramer. Oh, there you go, Dolly Parton. Okay. So, being a 10-ish year old kid, I the first thing I did was taped over the holes on the top, popped it in, and recorded my own songs over it called old school rap. Now I'm going to make the assumption this has probably got something like the Fat Boys, Beastie Boys, Run DMC. I mean, back then there was only so much rap you could really listen to. What Cameo and there were quite a few rap bands back then, but I only listened to a few. And being a young kid, born Gen X, we were the latchkey kids. We really did have kind of the run of the mill. I know the generations before us had stricter parents, and we, because of that, became helicopter parents. And I know this growing up as Gen X, how much freedom we had compared to the kids of today. I've heard of parents being arrested because their kids are hanging out down at the park when they're like 10, 11 years old. I'm like, Jesus, at 9 years old, I was riding across town to my old apartment complex on the highway. Safe? No, but reality? Yes. So, anyway, the point is that we grew up with many different formats, and that's what this is about because we were the format babies because a lot of the older generation in any time in history is forced to adopt certain things. A good example would be computers. A lot of people resisted it. My mom, I remember, was like, "Oh, I'm not going to use those," and then eventually you have to. The same thing happens with formats because they die. So I wanted to talk for a moment, and this is off the cuff. I don't have a pre-planned or recorded video, but it is a passion of mine, music and even media, movies as well. Um, but I want to start out where it all began with the mighty record right here. And when I first started listening to music, when I was, I don't know, however young, I mean, my parents raised me. My dad would listen to The Doors and Bob Marley, and I remember all these songs that like made me, reminiscing on Steely Dan and the shit that you would hear on like KGON, which is our local like classic rock station, which still blows my mind because it's not really classic rock anymore, but it is because I'm older. So classic rock is only when I was young in the 80s, listening to 70s music as classic rock. That was old to me. It was 10 years old. To me, even hearing like Guns N' Roses, I'm like, that's not classic rock. Oh shit, it is. But back then, records were still the thing we would buy. I remember buying Def Leppard, Guns N' Roses, all these different records, and we had these cheap all-in-one kind of record player, usually made by the Sound Design, all one word. And they sold these cheap all-in-one units, and you bought records because they were usually on sale. The reason being, because even though records of today have made a resurgence and sometimes they're beautiful and colored. By the way, this is one of my coworkers, so I just grabbed it off the shelf. Freebase Hyperspace, Planet High. I haven't really listened to them much, but I thought I'd grab somebody I know at least. But I have a vast record collection of maybe 2,000, 2,500 records. I don't know, maybe that much. At least 2,000, I think. And a lot of them are just records I've got in bins for free and whatnot. But a lot of these are actually very expensive records, and I don't know what to do with them all, because I'm overwhelmed. But I started collecting way later. I got rid of all my records like everyone else did in the 80s because of this amazing thing, the cassette tape, which blew the record companies out of the water. They didn't know what to do. They wanted to stop making these available. Very similar to the other one, which I'll get to when it comes to movies, because I want to do that separately. Film is totally different, but audio, the ability for people to record onto a recording tape like this and make their own album off of somebody else's cassette tape without paying for it, that may sound like your basic, piracy these days. Back then it was new. It wasn't something people could do before that, unless you had a 16 track recorder, or you could actually transfer the music onto a tape or a record. But these little cassette tapes changed all of that. Now, mind you, I am leaving one thing out. There was a transitional period with the trusty old 8-track. And many of you grew up with these if you were a 70s kid. These were a little earlier than my time. 8-tracks are just like cassette tapes. They have the same type of, magnetic tape within them. The only difference was they're much larger and bulkier, and they also don't apparently fit as much information, and they're not as long, and they are more prone to problems. The cassette tape changed everything. You can get up to like 120 minutes of recording time, vastly outperforming. This one has Cradle of Thorns, which was a California band we went to see when I was about 14, 13, and I went to Cali to see my mom's friend, and her son, who was a little older, took me to a concert called Cradle of Thorns, a punk band, which is known for like throwing crickets out in the audience and shit, at the Hollywood, wait, where was it? Now I can't remember. I'm mixing it up with all these other different venues that I've been to. The Whiskey A Go Go. It's a pretty famous joint in Hollywood. And he drove me all the way down there to see them. And I ended up with this recording of them. And it looks like on the other side it says something else, but I can't make it out. But these old tapes, they have, this is Melaleuca, starting your own Melaleuca business called New Horizons. My mother-in-law was a Melaleuca salesperson. But anyway, getting out of the cassette realm, there's also things like this, where Michael Crichton's Lost World, where you open it up and it looks like a VHS, but it ends up being 4 tapes, because audiobooks, were popular in this format. Everybody in the 80s had a Walkman with a cassette player. And then overnight, all of our cassette collections just became irrelevant once the CD appeared. At least that's what we thought. I kept my tapes just in case. The CD was, obviously, everyone's familiar with how CDs operate, so I don't need to go into detail. But, of course, there's my first punk band with my brother and the cover he made. First in line, now accepting corporate sponsorship. Yeah, we had a good time. We played a few shows here and there. My brother still plays in Hood River in a band. I played with him in that band, First in Line. Then we did a band called Related Material, which changed it to Time to Spare. And having CDs, being able to like record directly onto CD was a phenomenal change for musicians, because tapes were a little bit bulky and cumbersome. They could get eaten by the players. They were susceptible to warping and problems like that. A good quality CD would last a lot longer. And so CDs, that's where it was. That's where it stayed for a very long time. Now, there were other formats that had attempted to be done. A great one and a phenomenal example, I'm not going to name them all because there were so many, but MD, mini disc. A lot of folks have never even seen these before, but it's just like it sounds. It's a mini CD. This is a 74-minute one. You pull it out and it slides. It's got a little arrow. It slides right into the player. And if you look at the side, it may look familiar to a lot of people. This is what floppy disks, the second generation floppy disks, look like. I guess the first gen kind of were similar. But anyhow, those the smaller versions of the floppy disks had this little thing, metal plate that moves aside to allow access to the CD or to whatever disc you're playing. These were great because they avoided scratches and all kinds of problems. Now, is this a dead format? Yes, it's not coming back. There aren't enough people making them, but most of all, there aren't enough aftermarket secondary players to make it a viable option. And that's not necessarily what this whole video is about, not whether or not everything's going to come back or be a, dead format. But as we know from the beginning, records have made a return. Cassettes are now being sold by some websites as like kind of a novelty item. And but CDs, I would say everybody sold their CD collection to go digital. And now what we're finding is that you don't even own your digital library. Having access to a high quality lossless audio, a FLAC file or lossless copy of your music is becoming hard to get. I would advise people, if you're into records, to buy the record. Usually it comes with a digital download for free. Most records these days come with a free digital download. So you pay the same price as you would for the album on iTunes or a CD, but you pay for a physical copy, which goes directly to the person, and you get a free digital copy from it. And, even CDs had cool shit like this, right? This is a Pink Floyd box set, which, all the different CDs make out the pyramid, and all the labels are really small on the CDs. They're kind of interesting, but that's just kind of a novelty item on the side. I have all my favorite bands, from the day, The Doors, Jimi Hendrix, Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd, all the classics. I have their full library in FLAC format, or as best I could get, even if I could just get MP3. And this was about 10, 12 years ago, maybe more, when I used torrent. I was really into torrent files back then, and I was saying, hey, the world's at my fingertips. I could get any movies or music I want. What do I really want? And I was like, I'm not into piracy. And this is the thing, most people aren't. They don't want to take free shit that they haven't paid for. It's just that I thought, what are all the albums that I bought in the past that I've lost? And I bought most of these albums from these musicians who are long dead, a lot of them. And I thought, well, it's only fair to get the albums back that I paid for. And then what does it hurt to get some of the shit that's harder to find, right? So those collections I still have on a hard drive somewhere, which are, if I really want to hear the music, I have the copy, right, digitally. And that's great. But even if the digital format never gets corrupted, there's something about having an actual CD, a physical copy you can hold. Like, this was bought from, my wife bought this off of somebody at a concert, I don't know, a couple months ago, I think, that we went to, because they were selling a CD of their music. I've never even opened it to look at it, but see, it's got a real label on it and everything. It's nice. Musicians that make their own records, even print their own CDs, I highly recommend supporting them that way, because musicians don't get paid the way they used to. So with that said, everything's digital now. I don't know what to say about any of it coming back as far as, CDs. People still enjoy a physical copy though, but nobody's going to care about physical copies as far as like CDs as much as they used to, unless one day the internet just disappears, right? I mean, it's not going to happen, obviously. Maybe, who knows? A major power outage, what I'm saying, is something that took the internet down would be much worse than your music, right? We'd have bigger problems. But just to say, theoretically, we lost access to streaming music. Do you have enough of your own music physically that you can listen to? Which brings me to film. And it's funny, I feel the same way, and it's kind of the same story. I have, as far as making your own, I still use a digital Handycam. And this thing takes high 8 tapes, which are these puppies, or digital 8, which are the same size, but just different. It means you can get a digital copy at the same time as on tape. And these ones actually, I think you can push down the little tab and open it up to see the tape in here, which just moves around and around, winding up on the spool and filming physically what you're seeing. This one is Josh's documentary from 2014, which I obviously never finished. But there's also the mini ones, the mini DV, which I use both. I have different recorders, and I have This one, which is the high 8, but I also have a mini D. I have two of these and two of the mini DVs that when I do family events or holidays, I pull it out, I charge the battery, and I put it all on film. So you'll watch one of the tapes and it'll go literally through like 5 different years of holidays. And this to me is important because it's just something I've been doing for a while. I want to be able to have physical copies of these things, even though tapes can be wiped too, I know. But it's just having it in one spot. I feel like everything, taking pictures when I was younger was amazing. It was something special. It's kind of like if I start at the beginning when it comes to film, you've got things like this. And I'm a nerd. Okay, I collect all this shit. Like this one's Westerns. It's a Pioneer Outlaws. And we've got Popeye, Deep Sea Diver. And you open these little puppies up. You take them out. You unwind the actual film. You wind it onto the little receiving reel on the projector. You fire the projector up. You make sure you don't burn the acetate and burn your house down. Like these, it was an endeavor, an undertaking, and then you get maybe 10 minutes of movie if you're lucky, right, on these little spools. And that really, really changed when these came out. It was like, what, 75 years of that shit. And then all of a sudden, boom, somebody comes out with a giant version of the cassette tape, the VHS. And yeah, it's got the same story, a little tab on the side. If you ever wonder, these are locked on, but there's usually a little tab on the side you push, and you can open it up. But you can see that's where the tape starts, and this is the starting end with just clear. And this is my wife's ninth grade award. Wait, yeah. Oh, Michelle, I've never seen your ninth grade award. I'm gonna have to watch that. That's if I have the VHS player. So yeah, once these came out, the movie industry just flipped their lid. What do you mean you can just record off of the TV? And this went on for years. There was a lot of panic involved in people being able to record movies, but ultimately the panic was pretty unfounded. I mean, you can still make money off of movies, or you could. But I'm not going to get into the story of what happened today and how that lack of kind of mystique around new movies coming out and the fact that nobody cares anymore really is why movies just suck today. And there are some good ones, but you know the VHS thing really forced movie companies to try to implement all these new laws and regulations, lobby Congress to make copyright stronger. And that went on and on and on until something new came out, which had been around for a long time, just not utilized as much. And I also have a 007 laser disc over here, which I'm not going to bring out, but laser discs didn't fit as much information, so you'd have to have like two for a movie. So these were just what they sound like. They look just like CDs, but they are the size of records, and they are twice as heavy as records. And you get like two of them per movie. And so you pull out these giant discs and slip them into this giant disc player. And some people still use the laser discs. It's kind of a novelty item, but ultimately, DVDs were much more compatible with life. As we've got the Gods Must Be Crazy here, which apparently has the War of the Worlds in it instead, the Tom Cruise version. And both are some of my favorite movies. So yeah, I know it's cheesy, but the Tom Cruise version of War of the Worlds I just think was one of the creepier movies that I'd seen, at least at the time. um DVDs were a totally different thing. You could put them all in one little binder and have hundreds of movies if you wanted. But ultimately, we come to the same problem we had, which is digital started to overrun, and people abandoned all of their DVDs. Like a friend of mine had hundreds, and he was just saying, "You can, I'll sell them all to you really cheap, or give them to you." Like I had a few instances where people just gave me all their CDs because they're like, "Oh, I've got it all recorded. I've just got Spotify now." It's like, okay, but one day maybe it's ridiculous. Maybe carrying all of these CDs around with me and records and cassettes is more of just a novelty than anything. But at the same time, just having it actually on physical medium I think that really is a good thing, you know. But going back to the record, it stands alone. I mean, I've got records pretty much everywhere. There's a shelf full of them. Um, Robin Trower is phenomenal. We've got the Talking Heads here. But there's something about being able to like grab an album, open it up, look at the inner, the inner covers, and get to know a band. Sells the Marvel Universe. Oh my God, that's predictive. We've got another Talking Heads. Looks like we've got one of the Dark Sides of the Moon. I've got a lot of those. And Tom Petty. I was looking for one that maybe had a gatefold cover, but gatefold just means it opens up and the inside. I've got some records that have like almost like the fold out books. I have one where it folds out and has this whole scene with like crows and a building and people. People put love into records these days. One of the companies I order from actually sent me this. I think I won it in like one of their little contests, or it was a gift or something, because I ordered a bunch of shit, but it's just a little cutout from the center of one of their candy colored records. I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was, I wanted to say it was Appleseed Cast, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, I like movies. I love music. I like entertainment. Okay. But music especially. And so it brings me to where I guess, a point I should make here, a lot of younger people grew up with just what we have today. For them, it's always been music on a computer. They've never needed to deal with a physical medium, and that's not good nor bad. And I feel empathy and I feel sad for those people. I feel sad for the younger generation that it's so easy to find music and it's so easy to make music. The ones that never had to save up to buy an instrument, and the ones who can use like um, synthetic, voice alteration, voice modulation, beat correction to make it sound like everything's perfect in a song they make, instead of actually having to learn how to keep a rhythm, as well as listening to a lot of artists that use these tools but don't really have the deep skills to be true musicians. And that sounds harsh, I know, because there are a lot of great musicians out there, but also never having to wait to hear a song, as small as that sounds, to having a song stuck in your head that you just cannot listen to until it's played on the radio. That sounds horrible to a lot of people, but honestly, I think it was one of the greatest tests in patience. And yes, a lot of us sat with our taped over cassettes waiting to record it. And that's what we do. I actually still have my mixtapes from the 80s where I would record off the radio, and a lot of it's pretty funny. I've got Madonna on there, to the Fat Boys, to, comedy shit. It was really a good time. And I didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't afford all the formats, the new ones. So I was stuck with the old ones. But you know what? It was okay. It worked. And I guess that is where I am kind of grateful today, that no matter how much kids have, they can afford to listen to the things they want to hear and watch the things they want to see. Because that's something a lot of us couldn't do, you know. And anyway, here I am reminiscing about being poor in the 80s. I will leave it at that. And I think I've shared all the formats I wanted to share. There's plenty more. I'm over here looking at like a CD player that for the car, and thinking about how my Honda still has a tape player in it. And just, yeah, I'm ancient. It's weird getting old. You just feel like it was yesterday that you were, on top of technology. But man, at least I got $10 million or $10 billion over here from this Bank of Zimbabwe. I'm gonna go cash it in and get myself Bag of rice. I'll talk to y'all next time. Be well. Have a good day.